welcome back to Eye on Marvel. My name is Peter Levi, and today we're going to be talking about my review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the show in total. I was going to do a separate episode 6 review, but I feel like that's kind of pointless. We might as well talk about the whole show. Before we jump into that, a reminder to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Be nice to get over the current number of subscribers we have. It's always appreciated. Certainly those of you who are watching, thank you. And any feedback you have is, of course, welcome. So I posted this up earlier today. It's a bit delayed. As I mentioned in recent videos, my schedule kind of went all to shit when one of my cats passed away, but we are trying to stay on track here. I had a lot of thoughts about the show, and I'm not just going to regurgitate that article. I'm just going to try to hit the key points as we go. And then we can look forward to Loki, which should be coming soon. Loki is the series I was most excited for. I have to admit my expectations for it are much lower now than they were before. For me, both WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier have been disappointments, particularly given that we expect a very high level of quality from the MCU. And on the writing front, that has just not occurred. So, what are the issues for the show? The principal ones are based on storytelling. So story and character. That is where this show fails. I think on an emotional level, on a messaging level, possibly on a performance level, there are things to like about the show. And of course, not everything is wrong or bad. But this show is even more flawed than WandaVision. WandaVision, you had a poorly constructed B plot. But the A plot, up until I think the Agatha Harkness reveal, is pretty good. And then Agatha is a weak villain. Wanda makes some very odd choices at the end. We get the Ralph Bohner reveal. It collapses on itself at the end. But the majority of screen time is reserved for the A plot, and that is fairly good. For Falcon and the Winter Soldier, unfortunately, the high point is episode 1. And then we just start very slowly slamming our head into a brick wall. I'd left out some hope that the final episode would leave us on a high, but that just didn't happen. This to me it's a sad case. I compared it to the sort of middling Marvel shows we got from Marvel Entertainment, things like The Runaways, Iron Fist, Luke Cage. That's where this lies. You can probably compare this to Luke Cage season 2 or the second half of season 1. A show where you had good performances, but trying to make sense of the story that was presented it just didn't work. There were all sorts of problems. So I think that's probably the most apt comparison. Second half of the first season of Luke Cage in particular, but the second season as well. Some pretty obvious reasons to compare the two. I'm not going to go through the beats of the season 6 episode. If you saw it, you know what those are. We're going to focus more on broader issues. Before I jump into those specific opinions, let's just briefly go over public opinion. Now, we won't have final numbers for the show for quite a while. The through episode 3 numbers are out on Nielsen right now, where the show is second behind a terrible YA show called The Irregulars, which unfortunately I've seen some of. Now, it had been third after the second episode, and it was sixth after the first. So you might say, oh, the show's doing this. But it's much more so that the viewing hours of everything else have come down, while Falcons have stayed about the same. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues for the second half of the season. And I'm curious to see, will we see it drop off a cliff like WandaVision did after the finale? Because that's one of the problems here. It is good to get solid ratings, good ratings for the show. But if you really make an impact, people will continue to watch. And we didn't see that with WandaVision. And I have a feeling, could be wrong, but I have a feeling we'll see that with Falcon as well. where there just isn't the same value for revisiting the show because of the issues it has. But we'll have to see. The one thing we can say is social media stuff. The raw tabulation that is Google Trends. We saw a similar arc for the show to WandaVision in terms of its highest impacting episode was the finale, which just edged out the very first episode. And then the middle episodes were sort of a bit of a roller coaster ride, like a wave in the middle. The difference, though, is the interest in Falcon and Winter Soldier by that measurement is, I think, less than half of what WandaVision was. So to some extent, it was paying for all the mystery boxes WandaVision leaned on. But I also just think inherently there just wasn't as much to discuss. The show is if anything, I mean, beyond the confusions, it's pretty didactic. It has a very, very simple message that no one's going to miss. So there's not a whole lot to discuss. You're either like right on or it just doesn't work for you. So why does the show, in my opinion, fail? When I say fail, I don't want you to think that I believe it's a bad show or a terrible show. I don't think so. I think it's mediocre. I think it's average television with a good budget. So average television often includes good performances. It can look nice, but as a story, it's eminently forgettable. And unfortunately, that's what we get with Falcon. So the show, even though it has both characters in the title, this is a Falcon show. This is a Sam Wilson show. Its primary purpose is to make Sam Captain America. So if that's what you're going to do, presumably the focus of the show is going to be on that journey. Watching Sam transition from being Falcon to becoming Captain America. And that's not the case. Falcon is a passenger in his own show. Almost hilariously so. I put up, I haven't counted, it's 15 or 20 things to achieve in the show that Falcon either fails to do or someone else has to do it for him. There is nothing important that Sam Wilson achieves in this show, and nothing in this show that demonstrates a transition from the Sam we saw in Endgame to the Sam we're going to see after this show. The only changes are his name and the costume. So you had almost 6 hours of content, and it's the same guy. Like it boggles the mind that the least developed character in this show is the lead. I don't want to have to go through all of these points. I think that's a little bit redundant. But just a few basic issues. So he rejects John Walker. That's episode 2. The only reason he ever says why he turns him down is so the second offer that Walker makes to work together. It's at least 3. He says, oh, it's better if he and Bucky work alone. Although, of course, they can't possibly work alone. They're in a government, like a military plane later on. And someone's paying for them to go around before they pick up Zemo. But that aside, that continuity error aside, he never really gives a reason why it shouldn't be John Walker. He just doesn't like it. And then the only thing you can infer is that he believes Steve has given him power over the shield and the title. Falcon gets to decide. So he seems irritated more that someone else made this decision, not him. And that is terrible, terrible reasoning. And I have no idea why they did that. It would have been so much easier in fact, so much better if Falcon had been supportive of Walker and then Walker just failed because of his own flaws. And when he fails, Falcon's like, oh, you know what? Like I've seen, we need this symbol. We need someone who can, hold up the standard. And that's me. And then, you move forward. That to me would have been the simplest story to tell, but we didn't get that. He is irrationally sympathetic to the Flag Smashers, even though in his final speech, it's clear he doesn't understand the issue at all. This is never explained. He never defeats them. He never figures out anything that they do. Other people do that for him. It's bizarre. We're presented with him having financial problems. These are problems that don't affect him in any other circumstance other than the boat, and that's something he can't solve either. Even though he's got Pepper Potts' number, one of the richest people on the planet, neither his salary, because he's a paid mercenary. Mercenaries get paid very well. That won't do anything. He won't call any of his friends, and ultimately it's his neighbors who solve the problem for him. It's bizarre. There's so many things in here that are just utterly strange. He never gets upset when people are murdered. He doesn't. He has like one line about Nagel, and then other than that, forgets. So many other, people being killed. Falcon's like, what are you gonna do? Make an omelet? You got to break some eggs, right? Like he just, there's no thought that he has. He's not considering it. He's not dealing with it. Nothing. Doesn't care. And the thing that's supposed to bring the most sympathy and empathy to him is Isaiah Bradley's story. But this doesn't make him reflect on his own military past at all. Falcon never talks about any issues he might have had. He never talks about what should be done. Like, sure, he gets Isaiah's image put in the museum. And by the way, where are Isaiah's buddies who went through the same thing? Where's their statue? But he doesn't reflect on it, nor does he really try to ever convince Isaiah the other way. He never talks about how, oh, we can't be cynical. We need a symbol of hope for a reason A, B, and C, and D. He doesn't do that. So he doesn't convince Isaiah. Isaiah is convinced by crowds cheering on the new Captain America. And he's like, oh my God. People cheered for him. Whew, sign me up. So that whole storyline to me was a complete waste. And I understand on a meta level, Marvel cannot really go into race relations in the U.S. military. Not if they want to keep their cozy relationship with the military, and they do. But yeah, just an opportunity wasted. When you're going to push that button in your storytelling, you definitely need to follow through, and that's not done at all, except it's just surface level stuff. Like I said in another review, it reminded me of Captain America and sexism in the military. You get a brief flashback without really any explanation, and that's about it, other than sort of a general tone of girl power. There's nothing specific about it. So Falcon, unfortunately, a big dud. Anthony Mackie's performance is adequate, but he's outshined by Sebastian Stan, Daniel Bruhl, and even Wyatt Russell. Act circles around him. He's better than Aaron Kellyman, but that is a very low bar, as we'll get into. So our antagonist, the real antagonist for the whole show, are the Flag Smashers. And what a disaster this is. If anyone can sit there and actually explain to me what their ethos is, what they're actually trying to accomplish, I'll give you a gold star. We are told some things. GRC bad. Why GRC bad? Want to shut down refugee camps and close borders. Why are those things bad? Things were better in the blip because those things weren't an issue. Well, and the thing is, none of this deals with the real concerns of you just had about 3.5 billion people reappear and they need their lives too. Like there's no sense of any realism. It's just like, I don't want it. It's like a kid complaining. Initially their tactics of just providing supplies to refugees is perfectly sympathetic, even though they're stealing to do it. But then the switch to violence is so irrational. They're like, Kellyman's like, okay, we got to kill people to be taken seriously, get our demands met. When her own belief is that these people don't care that people are dying. What is that logic? They also don't make demands until the final episode? Bizarre. And then they're when they don't immediately get what they want to kill everybody. It's really strange. Kellyman's character herself is beyond bizarre. And we have our hero, our title character, cheering her on, taking her side, even though he doesn't understand anything. And then the GRC, who are ostensibly meant to be the real villain, they have no names, and their problem with the Flag Smashers isn't that they don't disagree in principle. They're just saying this is really hard to do. That is not a great villain. That is not a great villain group. Faceless bureaucrats who unfortunately make better points than your protagonist in his final speech. It's just terrible. We have some other sort of more minor things. Bucky, for example, the premise is, oh, he's suffering nightmares, he's having all sorts of issues. These things do not affect him in a meaningful way in the show at all. Not at all. He's like, oh, first episode, oh man, wow, this is so hard. Then we forget about it for 4 episodes, and the end of episode 6, hey, I finished my book. I am fine now. Terrible. And then his rejection of John Walker is just bizarre. For a man desperate for a second chance to be given another life that isn't the Winter Soldier, to be confronted with someone else looking for a second chance and just be like, fuck you, Steve Rogers picks Sam. So bizarre. It's such terrible reasoning. Zemo, carried by his performance, his backstory makes no sense at all given Civil War. The writers apparently made no effort for that to make sense. But Daniel Bruhl is so entertaining, you don't think about it. Batroc. You can't be an effective villain if all you do is lose. It just doesn't work. Batroc never feels like a threat. So I think St. Pierre did the best that he could with what he had. What are you supposed to do? You lost in Winter Soldier last time we saw you. You lose in the opening episode. And the second episode, you don't even really lose. Sharon Carter just shoots you. You know, it's not compelling. The show, speaking of continuity problems, what this show is riddled with, they forgot the Sokovia Accords exist. We know they're still in effect. Never gets brought up. You'd think it'd be pretty pertinent in a story that involves the super soldiers. Speaking of the super soldiers, there are apparently no negative consequences to taking the serum at all. None. The negative consequence only seems to be that Zemo wants you dead, which isn't really much of a consequence. I found this so bizarre. You had a great chance to tell an interesting story about the serum. This includes Isaiah Bradley and his buddies, and you just left it alone. Everyone who takes it, the Flag Smashers, who are all conveniently dead now, and John Walker, never been better. It's bizarre. And then Sharon Carter. What is the turn? What is that? She's a good character for 2 films, very clearly, not conflicted at all. And then you have a half-ass story about, for some reason, she didn't get a pardon when everyone else did. What? She could have called very powerful, important people who are in positions to give her a pardon, and she doesn't. Now, of course, she was snapped. You see her image in Endgame, and I had someone argue with me about this. And let's just say, for argument's sake, okay, let's say that didn't happen. She was alive. She had 5 years to call Natasha Romanoff and say, hey, buddy, you and the other remaining superheroes are like running the show. How about that pardon? She didn't pick up the phone. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then suddenly she's motivated by money and wanting, like, if she's not a Skrull, it's difficult. This is Ralph Boner levels of stupidity. Speaking of Ralph Boner, we have our cameo in episode 5 and 6. The lovely Seinfeld cast member who apparently thought she was Daffy Duck. This was so painful. Her appearance in episode 6 isn't as bad, but in episode 5, I honestly thought I was watching a cartoon character. And I compared it to Lex Luthor in the Snyder films. It feels like she's in something else. She doesn't know what she's in. She's supposed to be in a grounded show, and she's just like whipping around. I don't know. It was weird. Fortunately for her, if she can act, better writers and directors can do something with her. I just don't know what that will be. But at the moment, please, never again. So obviously I'm focusing on the negatives. There are plenty of people out there who will tell you how wonderful the show is, so you don't need me for that. I did really like the John Walker story. It's not perfect, but he has a proper hero arc. He has something to overcome. He makes mistakes. He wants to do well. That's always more compelling than someone who doesn't have problems. And his problems are internal as well as external. You don't just want externalities unless you're Superman. So that is well done. It's probably the best character arc in the show, even though it's not perfect. But of course, it's not even the focus, right? He has the Monica Rambeau time supply, essentially, from WandaVision, except, of course, his story is much better. So final thoughts. No story works without stakes, and this show has no stakes. Falcon is never in danger, and his change to becoming Captain America is never in doubt. It's just an fait accompli. You know what's going to happen. Bucky's never in danger. Nobody important is ever in danger. The antagonists are not interesting. They're not threatening. The action scenes, such as we get them, are mostly ephemeral. The Easter eggs, the Wakandas, are actually dumb. And the Wakandans beat up Falcon and Bucky. So what the hell do we need Falcon and Bucky for? Just screw the Avengers, grab the Dora Milaje. You don't need superheroes. You just need a bunch of people from Wakanda flipping their spears around. It's so stupid. It is fan service in the most pejorative sense. Just like I can't remember her freaking name, the chick from Seinfeld. Just like her appearance is basically just an Easter egg for boomers. Yeah, such a waste. You had such a good premise, and the first episode is pretty good. So you could see there was the potential for a interesting exploration of the story, and you really, really wanted to get away from how Sam Wilson Captain America is done in the comics, because that's always failed. And what are we left with? We're left with, okay, he's Captain America for no reason at all, in a dumb costume, unfortunately. Anthony Mackie is 2 years older than Chris Evans, who's still floating around. You can't tell me that most people, casual fans at least, won't be wishing Chris Evans comes back sometime after this. It just doesn't work. The only thing it really accomplishes for me is it carries a few plots forward. Bucky is now mentally stable for whatever reason. Sam is officially Captain America. We have a John Walker, who's actually an interesting John Walker. Zemo's in the raft, because that's what Wakandans do apparently. And Sharon Carter, bad. Sharon Carter, bad. Can't forget that. Very bad for reasons. And so after 2 shows with sloppy writing like this, I had to ask myself, is the bloom off the rose for Kevin Feige? Feige is deservedly lauded for what he's done, but if you go back through the films from the last 4 years or so, and you look at these shows, I'm starting to ask questions. Guardians 2, it's okay. The funny stuff is funny, but the serious stuff is not, and it's overly long. Ant-Man 2, it's not as good a film. It's not as funny. The writing isn't as good. Captain Marvel, it's a weak solo story. She's a boring character. Someone has to give her some internal issues or something. Otherwise, she's just flying around as a Mary Sue. And Spider-Man 2, this I think is more arguable, but it's not as good as as Homecoming. And there's a lot of wasted secondary characters. Mysterio could have been better. That's almost half the films from Guardians 2 to now that have been average. And when you have 2 shows that have been at best average, you have to wonder, is there less oversight? Is he more a movie guy? I just don't know. So I feel like with TV, he's probably more hands-off, and that's likely why we've received these, in terms of MCU standards anyway, subpar shows. These should have been top-notch Marvel Netflix quality shows. Obviously, the tone would be lighter. It's perfectly fine. That's what I expected. That's what I think fans should expect. They have the budget. The talent is available. People want to participate in these things. The hype is real. There's no excuse for the errors that have been made. It's just bad storytelling. So I really hope Loki is a return to form. Although my expectations are lower, and I have serious concerns over things like Ms. Marvel, which is, young adult stuff, She-Hulk, which is supposed to be a comedy. The comedy parts of WandaVision are just average. I have a lot of concerns, and it's going to be really depressing if all the MCU TV just turns out to be average TV. I can see average TV anywhere else. I don't need Disney Plus for that. So it's going to be interesting to see. My reaction is certainly probably not going to be everyone's. And I have no idea how casuals will react to it. I definitely know people who are not within the Marvel community, as in the coverage community, have had a poorer reaction to this than WandaVision. And that's a bit like the canary in the coal mine. That is a sign that there are some issues here. So we'll see what happens. I still have hope that whatever script Malcolm Spellman writes for Captain America 4 will be thrown in the garbage, and they'll get someone who knows what to do. Because they can still fix Sam Wilson Captain America. We could still get a good, interesting Sam Wilson Captain America. But right now, he is a man who has no flaws, and he's Captain America, and I don't know what his story could possibly be. Falcon doesn't really have interesting stories. Those are all Steve Rogers stories. So I guess you're going to have to write something original or just take something from Steve Rogers. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Anyway, I've rambled long enough. I owe videos for my Sony and Universal stories. I may combine them. I don't know. I recorded a Sony video, but I wasn't happy with it. Beyond that, there'll be a news digest, and I'm not quite sure what'll be up next, but regardless, it'll be here on the channel, and I'll certainly put it out on social media when the time comes. So anyways, thank you for watching, and we will see you all next time.